Hello friend, welcome back to our channel KBS Technocrop. Today we are diving into mocks, stuff and fakes in unit testing. These are essential test doubles used to isolate the part of your system you want to test, ensuring that your tests are reliable, repeatable and independent of external system. Let's start by defining what test doubles are and how they fit into test-driven development. So let's try to understand what are test doubles. Test doubles are objects that replace dependencies in tests. They simulate the behavior of real object so that you can focus on testing a specific part of your system. Right. So to understand in more detail, we will dive deep in each section. So first try to understand that what we are going to cover it today. So in this we are going to understand what is mock, and then when we should use mock, and then we will take a real-time scenario and we will try to understand that how we can use a mock concept in a real-time scenario, right? And then similar way we will try to understand what are the stuff, and then when we can use stuff, and then we will try to simulate a real-time scenario and try to write some test cases, unit test cases using stuff. Then we'll move to fake and we will try to understand what is fake, and then when we can use it, and then we will take a real-time scenario for using fake and we will try to write some unit tests using fake, right? In the last we are going to compare this all test doubles concept, mock, stop and fake. We will understand that what is the difference between these terminology. Basically when you ask, most of the developer get confused the terminology between mock, stuff and a fake. They typically use as an interchangeable word for this, but it's a different. And what are the difference we will come to know when we go one by one and look on the real-time scenario and we will try to compare it. Let's understand what is mock. A mock is an object that verifies behavior. It is not just a replacement for a dependency, but also it keeps track of how it used. The primary purpose of a mock is to ensure that certain methods are invoked or certain interaction occurs during the test. So when basically we should use it, when you need to verify that method was called. Let's say consider there is a class which are also having a dependency with the other class where there is some method. Now you want to check that when you are writing your test cases, right, you want to verify that the method which belongs to other class, right, is getting called. And if it's getting called, what are the parameters with which that method get called? You will come to know in more detail when we are going to have a real-time samples, right? Second, the second scenario when we should use it when testing code that depend on the interface or service and you want to confirm behavior rather than the result. So when you are having a dependent classes, right, and one class inject other class, in that case you want to confirm the behavior of the dependent object is communicating, or the method which is there in the dependent object is getting called with the right parameter. It does not verify the result, but it's just verify the behavior. Let's say consider here we are having a a notification service, and that notification service used to send email, and you want to test that send email method was called when user registered. So basically let's say consider this this notification service is getting called somewhere where user registration happened. So using unit tests you want to make sure that when a notify method for the notification service is getting called, then we are making sure that the given email ID with the message called welcome is getting called, which is which is part of the email service, right? Email service which implemented the iMail service, right? So we will take example. First we'll try to add this code there, and then we will try a test case using this mock and see that how we are going to verify that behavior, that the send email is called with a given parameters, right? So the mock is basically used for verifying the behavior, yeah, right? Testing the behavior, not the result. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio and try to open Visual Studio and see that how we can test this. I have opened Visual Studio and then I have added the code which we require to test it. So as I have explained it, we are having email service interface. So this interface contains a method called send email, and then we have implemented that interface into the send email. As of now there is no code, it's just for explanation. So we have implemented that interface here, and then we are having a notification service. So notification service basically has the dependency with the email service. So here we have injected the email service in the constructor for the notification service. So it's a constructor injection here, and then after the injection in the notify method, which is part of the notification service, we are trying to send email, right? So this is the overall functionality or code which we are going to test it. So what I'm going to add it, I'm going to add a new test here, add new project, and I will select the xUnit project here. So xUnit test project here, I will click next, right? So I will put sample dot mock dot test, and I'll click next, create it. Okay, so what I have done it, I have created simple name, simple, however there's mock dot sample. Let me rename it. So I will rename it mock dot sample dot test, sample dot test. Just how the in real time scenario we do that. So we have a mock sample which is actual code which we supposed to test it, and then we have a test case, right? So we are going to add some code there, and just to save the time I'm going to add a simple test case here. So first we need to add a project reference. So I will select dependency and add project reference, and then I will select mock sample and I will do that. Then inside the unit test, what I'm going to do, that I'm going to write some test case for writing the unit test. So I'm going to write a test case which we are going to check that the send email function called at least once. So now this, and then we will add some dependencies here, add manage NuGet package, and then we have to use moq. We will click on browse, and then I will install this moq here, apply. Okay, so that's fine. So we have installed. So if you are not aware about that, what dependencies are required to install it, I have created already one video for environment setup. You can refer it. So for time being, we just consider that we required MOQ to be installed NuGet package because we are using for mocking. So I just used it. So what I did it here, I have added MOQ uh, uh, reference here, and then I have added this test case. So let me explain what we are doing. So this email service, since email service, if you see this code, since the email service are injected into the notification service, so we have to create a mock for email service. So That's why what I did it, I have created a mock email service. That's how the syntax is. You have to create new mock and that interface type. And then since the new service is required a constructor injection for the email service, that means we have to pass the email service object. So once you create a mock, then you have to pass this mock object, because mock object is the value which return you the type of email service. So I just first line I mock that email service, then I initialize this constructor or created a new object, then I'm calling a method located into the notification service. If you see here in the notification service, we are having a method called notify, and this method is calling email service that send email. Now what we are doing it, we are calling that, and here we are having verify, because mock is for behavior verification. So we are verifying that this methods, right, send email method is called with the input parameter which we passed. And welcome, why welcome? Because welcome is hard coded in my this method. So we are checking the email which we I'm passing for notify, and the input parameter which is hard coded inside that. This send email method is calls at least once. So now let me build it and test it, run the test case. I build the solution and I will go text explorer, and then we will run this test case. So what I will do, I will run it. I'm running this test case. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. Okay, it's running. It's started running. Okay, so it's a pass. So this test case get passed. Now, if you want to, let's say consider I'm changing email. Now, if I run this test case, right, it will get filled, because what we are passing the email as a test1 at the rate example.com, but what we are verifying is that this test at the rate example.com. So technically this test case should get failed, because the input parameter which is actually getting called for calling the send email is, it should be test1, but I have given test at the rate example.com. So again I will go to the test explorer, right, and then I will run it. I will first save it and then run it. So let's say this time this test case should get filled. Okay, it's get filled, right? And if you see here error, it will say that here, if you see here, it was telling that expected invocation on the mark once but what zero. That means with this input parameter that send email method was not called. What it was called? It was called for test one. So let me put it same here, and again go to test explorer, save this and run it. So you will be able to see that the test get pass, right? So let me re-explain once. The mock is basically for verifying the behavior. So we will, whenever you are mocking, right, you mock that dependencies, and then when you are verifying it, what you are verifying, you are just verifying the behavior. That means that mass is called only once. Okay, sometimes people get confused, because same mock NuGet package or the library or third party library is used for mock and stub both, but both are two different concepts. We will discuss and understand stuff. I hope about the mock it will be clear. Now let's understand what is the stub. By definition, a stub is an object that returns predetermined data to the test. Unlike a mock, it does not track interactions. Its only purpose to provide indirect input to the system under test. So basically, whenever you are having some request response or input need to be provided to a system, then we basically require a stuff, right? So basically, let's say consider you are calling a method, right? And you want to verify that that method, whatever response is written, right, that is required to verify in any of your test cases. In that case, we will use stub. So stub is basically, it will tell a method, or you will be able to set up a method what it should return, and that test case will also be able to verify that the expected result from a system is returned by that particular stub, right? So let's go to the, and we will understand that when to use this step. So basically, when you need to provide a data or responses to a system under test without verifying behavior, you should use step. Typically used when testing logic that depends on the method output. So for example, if you are having some method which returns something, you want to verify that that particular method returns this data, right? And you want to see that the data return type of data is the return type of data is as expected, right? So basically, mock used to provide, or mock is required to use when you are testing the behavior of the system or behavior of that particular code, right, or dependent objects, right? But when you are willing to verify that what that method returns, right, about the request and response data or return type that method, then we use stub. Most of the cases, right, mock and stub are used together, where in the same test case you can write a test case where you can see that that particular method is called with this given parameter, how many times is get called. Also in the same method we used to write the test cases to verify that whatever the method is required to return is there. So stub is basically for verification of the data and response, what that particular method which we are going to test is supposed to return, and then we can compare with the expected with the actual, and based on that we can make that test case pass or fail. So let's consider a scenario, real-time scenario, where you are having a order service that depend on the iOrder repository to test the service. You need to test this service, right? If you see here, we are having a order repository which get order by id, and then we are having order service which injects the order repository. So if you are not aware about that, what is repository is basically a design patterns where all the data access has to happen with the repository. So repository is responsible for all CRUD operation with the database. So if you have used entity framework or any other database, you might have used it, right? So here what we are doing it here is that, like basically we are having a uh, uh, get get order by id, and then get order by id is also basically used by this order service to get order and process order, right? So basically if you see this process order is taking id, and then it's basically getting that order and returning that order, right? So in this case, whenever we are trying to test that the given id, when we pass this particular id, right, then this matrix returns the order value, order returns the order object, and also the expected value when you pass a id 1, it should give me order 1 value, right? So that's what we are going to write a test case and we are going to understand that how the stuff is different from mock, right? So we will stop here and we'll open Visual Studio, and then we will try to get this code in the Visual Studio, and then we will write a unit test case using this stuff, and we will see what is the difference there. Now I have added a other project here is called stuff example, and that whatever I have discussed earlier, I have a order service. So where we have a get order by ID, and then we have a order. This is a your model or entity or DTO you can consider, which requires two attributes here, like you have a order and you have a product name, right? And then you have a order repository. This order repository is basically the repository which basically implement that I order repository interface. And then we have a order service. Basically order, basically order service used to uh, inject the I order repository. That means this order service is depend on the order repository. And then we have a method which like basically process order, which internally use that order repository to get order and return it, right? So let's say consider we want to test it that when I pass this order ID, then this particular method, right? This process order method is returning order object, and it also returning the valid information for that particular given order. So to test that, let's add one solution called step.simple.test. So what I'm going to do that I'm going to add new project here, add new project, and then I will select this. I will click next, and then I will start that simple dot test, right, and create it, right? So I have given the similar naming convention so that after I add this code into a repository, and I will save that code into the description, so that you can refer this code. So for step sample, I have created a step sample dot test here. Now I'm going to add one test case which will verify the order object. So I'm going to add it, a test case here, right? And before that I need to add the MOQ because it's a different solution. So I have to add the NuGet package called uh, MOQ, and then we have to install it. So I install this, right? And then we have to add the project reference. So we will add project reference, and here we will add only step sample because it contains only this. So we are good. I hope so. So let's build this solution. So it's a building, and you can see, okay, so we need to add this namespace there. So I'm adding this namespace. That's it. Okay, so we are good now. So if you see this test case, what we are verifying, like we can add here verify, okay, returns order, right? So here we are going to verify the response of this or return of that get order, right? Our process order is having the order information. So let's go one by one. So we will talk later what is arrange act assert. Basically it's a 3A model for unit test in other video, but let's say consider here in arrange section what we have it, we have mock the I repository. Why we mark the I repository? Because I order repository, because I order repository is injected into the order service. So if you want to stuff something, we have to use this mock library to stub it. So we have created a stub object, and then we are setting up what we are doing it. First we created a stub object, and then we are setting that whenever this get order by ID is called by input parameter 1, then it should return this order. right? So we are just setting up the return type, return data for this get order by id. So when this line is basically is stubbing, so we are stubbing, we are saying that whenever get order by id is called by integer 1, right, 1, then it should return this value. Now we are calling, then because we have set up this data, when you call this method by 1, it will return the data what we have provided, right? So let's test it, and let's save it and go to test explorer now, right? I will go here, I will run only this test case, so let's run it. Okay, so you will be able to see that is passed. Now if you, since our step is only for the order by 1, if I put 2 here, right, you will be able to see this test case is going to fail because this step will not work the way we have stopped it. There is a way of making generic that I will explain it in different video, but let's see that. So I will save this and I will go test explorer and run this test. Right, you can see that the test is saying order not found. Why is order not found? Because in our stub object we have said that whenever order 1 is getting called, then only we are then only we are returning that object, otherwise it will not, right? So if I say here it dot is any int. Okay. Now, if I run it, right? If I run the test case, let me run the test case. I will go in Test Explorer and then I will run it. Okay. So you are able to see this test case get passed. Why is getting passed? The way we are stubbing the data now, here we are saying get ordered by ID. If you pass any integer, then it should always return this value, right? Earlier, what we have it earlier, let me copy this code and save it here. Earlier, what we have it, we had it only one, right? So in that case, what was happening, whenever you are passing one, that time only the test case was getting filled. Now what I did it, that this line is changed to this line to make it generic, right? So anyway, both are correct. If you are willing to stop and use that stub in multiple places, you do not want to specify any value, you want to specify a type, then you can go with this approach, right? So that I will talk later, but just understand that stubbing is basically what we say, that what kind of data it has to return, and when you are verifying the data what it's supposed to return, right? In that case, this is where we use stuffing, right? And if you see the mocking, right, I will compare later, but if you see in mocking what we have done it, right, we have just verified, we have just check that whether this method is called with this given parameter. That is only behavioral test. But here if you go, we are checking whether what we are setting, stubbing that what it should be returned, and then we are verifying that return value, right? So let's move to next and we will try to understand what is fake with the real-time scenario, and similar way we will create a unit test and solution for that. Now let's understand what is fake. So by definition, a fake is a simpler version of the real dependency. It has working implementation, but it usually simpler than the real things. Fakes are used when you need fully functional but simplified version of a class or a system. So basically fake is related to any external dependencies which is used inside your services, your application, and that that piece of code you want to test it. For example, you have some database or external files which are used in a function which you want to test it. Let's say consider a scenario where you are having a function which basically communicate with some database. But now, since unit tests should not be uh, depend on the external system, either it's a database or file or any networks, right? So in that case, what we do, right, we will create the fake of that particular external dependencies. For example, which I said that, let's say consider you are having a SQL Server database which connect through the using entity framework or any data access component or ORM, and you do not want to communicate to database during your unit testing. You, in that case, what you are going to do, that you are going to generate a fake data, right? Fake data which will be used for your testing purpose, right? So let's consider when to use fake. When you need a real but simpler implementation of a class, a service, or data, you require to use fake. Often used to avoid external dependencies, as I explained, like database, file system, API, network systems, like those. Whenever you are having the test cases, right, you can create your fake instance of the data. There is a multiple way of doing the fake database created. You can use bogus, you can use other third-party library to create fake data, or you can create a simpler fake implementation of your data which you can use it. So in this example, I'm not going to use bogus or any other third-party library, which I will explain in the upcoming video. But in this, we are going to create a simple fake object which we are going to use it in our test. So let's say consider a scenario where you are having a iUser repository, and then in this iUser repository, basically there is a user repository which implements this iUser repository, and it used to communicate to the database. Now, what we are going to do, that instead of using the actual repository, because the test is required to be test the service which use this user repository. So what we are going to do, that we are going to create a fake repository itself. In this fake repository will be a similar kind of real repository, but it's not going to communicate to the database. It's going to return a fake data which we are going to create it inside this repository, right? The fake data can be generated using any third-party library like Bogus. If you are interested, go Google, and I will provide the link for Bogus. You can search it. But in this, we are going to just use a very simple fake user repository to implement it, right? So we will understand this using Visual Studio. So let me open the Visual Studio, and we will say that how to write a unit test using fake concept, right? So now what I have done it, like the previous example, I have added the code just to save the time. So this is the actual code which we want to test. In this we have seen, we will go from top, that iUser repository which has two methods, get user and add user, and that user is just like entity or DTO or model, basically entities which require to insert or edit. Basically this is the entity which we are having two attributes, id and name, and then user repository which implement the iUser repository, and basically it has the add user and get user by id. I have not defined any definition here or any method definition, but just to represent it in real time scenario, uh, how we can write it. In the future, I'm going to create other video where we are going to create a working project where we are having all dependency with the database and other external system and test it. But time being, let's say consider this user repository is having some communication with database, and when we are going to test it, we do not want to communicate to database. That means we want to fake uh, those database object, or we want to fake the data so that we can use it without external dependency. And then we are having a user service where we are having a constructor injection which implements the iUser repository, and then it contains one method called create user. So in create user is basically is getting the user, and then it's adding one incrementation on top of that particular user id, and then it's adding the user to database. So whenever you pass, you are calling this create user, is going to take a name, and then it's increment the id by one and call that repository method add user, which technically it should communicate to database to save this user information. Now this is the scenario which we want to use fake and test it. So I'm going to create a new test project. So I'm going to create a new project, and then I'm going to select xUnit, and then I'm going to use fake simple dot test, then add it, create it, right? So before we write it, right, what I'm going to do that, as we mentioned that we need to use fake. So since we are going to test user service, we will create a fake user repository in our test, just for test, because in our scenario we want to test the user service behavior, user service code, not the user repository. In that case we are going to create a fake user repository, and then we are going to use that fake repository by injecting to the constructor and creating new object, and then that will be used. So let me quickly add some code there. So I'm going to add a code called fake user repository. Then let me go here, and first I will add two things. Add the dependency, project dependency. In this project we are going to have a fake sample, so I added. Again I'm going to add manage NuGet package which is called moq, which might not require, but let me add it here. So I will, okay, I think I've added to wrong project. Let me, okay. This is stuff basically we are going to use here. So let me add dependencies here. So fake sample dependency, I have added it like this. And then I will add mock also. So I will go here and attach no package, and then I will try to use moq, and I will install it. Apply. Okay, that's fine. Now we will add a class there called fake repository, and then we will try to implement it. So I'm going to create a new class here, add a new class, and I'm going to give as a fake repository, user repository. So I'm going to give name as a fake user repository and add it. Okay, and then I will use iUser repository interface because it has to implement iUser repository, and then we will implement this. Okay, we will add it here, right? Let's say now we will have to add some code there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some code here. So here user, right? So This the very basic one, right? We can add here user dot add. Let's say I will add a private method here. Private get fake user list, and then let's say we will try to return this. Okay, and we will return this. You can write in different way, just I'm trying to write a simpler way. Okay, so I'm going to write user. Since user object is created here, now I will add, let's say consider new user, and then we will put id equal to 1, name equal to test. Let me add one more user. So we are whenever a whenever we are going to call this repository, now it does not communicate to any database because we are just creating fake and we are creating this fake data. So what we are going to do, that we are going to basically, let's say users equal to that fake user list, simple. Okay, we will create it, and then what I'm doing, we will do that like this. Okay, so here what we are doing, whenever we are going to communicate, are going to use the data, the user data, we are having this fake data implementation, right? This fake data implementation can also be achieved by different framework like bogus and all. I will try to add some code and I will show you later. I will be able to explain this in the other video, but let's see that. So right, if you're going to use bogus, that you can read out, that code will be like this. So there is, right, there is a bogus library which we need to add it, and using that you will be able to achieve what manually we have done it. What I'm doing, I'm not going to cover it. I'm going to take some time and I'm going to come up with other video on that. So now it's done. Now, till now we have just created a fake repository. Now we have to write some test case. Let me add some test case for that. So now let me add one test case for this user service. And if we go here and we will add this test case. Okay, so if you see here what we have done, we are creating a object of fake repository, and then we are passing that fake repository to user service. Why we are doing that? Because since the user repository which is there, let's say consider the user repository which is there, it's actually communicate with the database, right? I have not shown here, but technically user repository will communicate to a database. And when I am testing this user service, I do not want to communicate to the database. I want to use some fake data because the unit test should be independent from the external system. So that's the reason what I did it. I created a fake repository and then I created a service test where I have created a fake repository object and I injected into the constructor, and then I added a code to verify that, right? So this test case will basically will get filled, because here we are having that name equal to alias, and then in my mark data, sorry, fake data, I will put id where alias, right? So now it should work fine. Let me save it and go to the test explorer. And if I go here, fake sample, right, any test, and then you can run this test case, you'll be able to see this is working fine. Let's It's building, and let's wait for 1 minute. It will run. And the next, we are going to compare all these three, and we will try to understand what is the difference between mock, stub, and fake, and in which scenario we should use which one. Okay, there might be a possibility that you are, okay, expected it one actually equal to two, because I have added two data in my test data, so that's why. So user ID equal to one, and get user not null, user ID equal to one. Okay, so let me go there and remove other data for time being. Just if I go in the test explorer and try to run it, there is some issue. Expected one, actual two. Let me correct it. So there is some test case where we are expecting one, user.id, one equal to user.id, and user equal to alias, create user, username alias. Okay, so here should be two, because one user is already there. So first they are incrementing that, so that's why it's happening, because you get the max number of the id and then you are adding it, so that's why it should be two. So if you go to the test explorer and run the test case, it should pass. Okay, it's passed. Why it's happening? Because in your code, right, if you see in the actual service code what way they are doing, that they are basically getting the id and then they are adding it, so that's why it's a return to a basic, that's why it's happening. Okay, so now let's compare these all three concepts, which will make you to understand when to use, and which scenario we should use fake, when which scenario we should mark, and when we should use uh, stuff, right? Now let's understand what is the major difference between mock, stuff, and fake. So let's try to compare purpose wise, right? So mock, the major purpose of the mock is that verify interaction or behavior, right, when you are writing unit tests. Stub is basically, the major purpose of the stub is to provide data to the system under test. Fake is basically for simulating or simplifying the implementation by using some kind of fake concept or fake database. What does it verify? Is it verify method calls, and it verify the interaction. Stub, it does not verify, it just return the predefined data what we set up, right? Fake, it does not verify anything. It behaves, it's just a behave, it's just like a it is just replace any external system, and it will behave like that particular system. For example, as I have explained, as I have shown you the demo, right? For user data, what we have done it basically, we have created a fake data which works exactly how the uh, actual SQL Server database would have been behaved when you try to add or insert the data. A real example, as we have discussed, right, we will consider those three examples. The notification service which we have used that notification code to just verify that, to test that whether that email has been sent with these particular input parameter, or email send method get called, right? And then step what we have verified that it's returned the data from a repository. And in the fake, what we have seen, the user data we have configured, we have created a fake in memory data for our test case purpose, for running the unit test case purpose. Let's understand when to use what. You should use mock when testing behavior. You should use stuff when you are testing state or output or result from a particular function, right? And fake, you should need a real implementation, right? When you are not willing to communicate to external system as per the unit test rule, right? You should not have external system communication or real database communication. In that case, we should use fake. So that's all for today. I hope this video will help you to understand at certain level of unit testing. If it's help you to understand, please write, like, subscribe, and share this video to maximum developers so that they can refer this. If you feel there is some improvement area or there is some improvement is required, please drop a message in the comment box. I will try to correct it in the upcoming videos. Thanks for watching my channel.